Before we get started, if you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. Now let's dive into recap. The story begins on a stormy evening at the Roth mansion, where our girl is completely unaware of what's going on. She listens as someone gives her a 6-month deadline to kill her husband. She appears confused, prompting the villain-like lady in front of her to yell, demanding a response and reminding her that she better do a good job, especially considering she paid money to take her from her family. Still, our lead character, a girl with golden eyes and pink hair, doesn't understand a word until she feels a sharp ache in her head. This triggers a flood of memories, including the fact that her father sold her to this wealthy family. She then realizes that this angry-looking, middle-aged woman is Sienda Roth, the stepmother of her husband, whom she married just today. Now that Alice understands what's happening, she promptly apologizes to Cien, who reminds her that she should not consider herself the Duchess, but rather her pawn. In an authoritative voice, Cien orders her to ensure that her husband, the Duke, is no longer alive after 6 months. Nervously, Alice complies. She loses all strength and collapses to the floor in confusion as Cien exits the room, questioning what is happening to her. After that, Alice chooses to check her reflection in the mirror. She's startled to see she's inside another person's body, but she adores how lovely she looks. That aside, she begins to recall the events that led her here. She is Han Swan, a kitchen assistant who isn't exactly a culinary expert. While going about her daily work and trying to make ends meet, she was involved in a gas explosion. Unfortunately, the fire truck was off duty that day. Just her luck. She feels bad, as she most likely died in that incident. In any case, she is no longer Han Swan but rather Alice. Fortunately, she retains Alice's memories and discovers that despite being born into aristocracy, Alice's family was not wealthy. The only joyful memory she has is of being carried by her mother. Alice's father saw her as an added burden, caught between a brother who would inherit the title and a younger sister who is unwell, so he married her off to the Roth ducal family. The name Alice starts to sound familiar. The Alice in Wonderland movie pops into her head. This girl is really unserious. She quickly tosses such useless thoughts aside and recalls reading a novel similar to her current situation, where the wife was ordered by her mother-in-law to kill her husband. That couple story was just the introduction to the novel. The wife's name in the book, Alice de Roth, the very name she now carries. Alice is startled by the realization that she has to kill someone. To make things worse, she learns her husband is already in a coma, so it's easy to picture him as a lifeless corpse. But as she peeks into the bedroom, she's pleasantly surprised to see a sleeping beauty instead, which makes her blush uncontrollably as she swoons over his toned body. She swiftly averts her gaze, trying to calm herself down. Girl, relax. Then, she remembers Alice's fate in the novel and is shocked to learn that Alice is sentenced to death by hanging for poisoning her husband. It becomes clear that her mother-in-law is using her as a scapegoat. Realizing this, Alice bangs her head against the wall in an attempt to wake up from this bizarre dream. It doesn't work. So, she ends up lying next to her husband, curled up and unsure of what to do. Eventually, she falls asleep and slips into a nightmare. In the dream, she's racing through darkness toward a light when, all of a sudden, a man embraces her from behind and declares that she'll never escape. Alice wakes up gasping for air, but the nightmare fades quickly when she realizes she's holding her husband and resting her hand on his chest. She wants to keep it there, but her conscience tells her to pull it away. This handsome man is Kailas de Roth, an extraordinary young duke who fell into a coma after being poisoned by his stepmother. In the original story, he eventually dies. Alice is heartbroken to realize that Cien's only plan is to keep him in a coma until death. Her thoughts are interrupted by a knock at the door. It's Maris, her maid, bringing water for a wash. Alice can tell just by Maris's expression that Madame Cien sent her to spy on her, and she's right. The maid arrogantly places the basin of water in front of her instead of washing her herself. Maris smirks, intending to show no respect to Alice, seeing her only as someone Madame Cien is using. But Alice simply smiles instead of reacting, because this is nothing new to her. She's endured worse. She washes her face and even compliments Maris on the perfectly tempered water, which irritates the maid. Maris replies that the madam is waiting for her. Seeing Maris's annoyed expression is oddly satisfying. As they say, kill your enemies with kindness. When Alice arrives, she gracefully greets her mother-in-law. But Cien is unimpressed and coldly orders her to sit. There's another guest at the meeting. It's none other than Dr. Helen, a charming man with long silver hair and glasses. Alice gets goosebumps when she sees him, as she remembers this genius doctor is the one who created the colorless and odorless poison for Madame Cien, which turned Kailas into the helpless man he is now. However, Alice grins mischievously. She plans to use this comrade to her advantage. She may be swooning over her gorgeous husband, but don't be fooled, this girl is clever. During the meeting, Helen explains that the poison he created will kill the Duke in about 3 months. He adds that once consumed, it will cause Kais's internal organs to decay, and the best part is that it will leave no trace. An autopsy will reveal nothing. Already astounded by the poison that rendered Kais unconscious, Madame Cien is overjoyed to hear this and commends Helen for concocting such a lethal substance. After that, she asks whether Kais will feel any pain when his organs begin to deteriorate. She's disappointed when Helen answers no, because Kais will be in a deep sleep. Imagine being unable to move and still experiencing such suffering. This evil stepmother is insane. Alice trembles as she listens to Cien, who then explains that killing Kais in 3 months will be problematic because her son, Adele, will not yet have reached the age of 16. For the emperor to authorize the succession to the duke's title, a noble must be at least 16 years old. Cien is concerned that once Kais's death is announced, the extended family will begin demanding the title. Helen laughs, realizing that this is why Cien asked him to create a sleeping poison, to keep Kais technically alive, allowing her to manage the duchy until Adele comes of age. Helen assures her that there's no need to worry because they can simply adjust the poison dosage to extend Kais's life to 6 months. He then draws Alice's attention and informs her that, since she will be the one feeding the poison to the Duke, she must now reduce the intake, something she is compelled to do. After they leave the room, Alice requests a private conversation with Helen. They go to his workroom, and she's relieved that it's soundproof. When the doctor begins to explain the dosage she needs to give Kais, Alice cuts him off. She states facts about him: his age, 35, his medical expertise, and his hobby of collecting poisonous herbs. The doctor begins to sweat at her abrupt shift in tone, but Alice just smiles and says she knows a lot about him. Then she directly asks, knowing how cruel Madame Cien is, why would he meddle with the duchy's affairs? Helen becomes serious and accuses Alice of spouting nonsense and framing him. However, when Alice gestures toward his bookshelf and suggests that if she pushes it over, he should prepare to say goodbye to the world, the panic on his face is almost comical. Alice had read in the novel that rare, deadly herbs Helen collects are hidden behind his bookshelves, and each is worth a fortune, equivalent to a mansion. When the duchy was thrown into chaos following Kais's collapse, Helen stole the family treasure to purchase his precious herbs. He could have invested in property or something practical, but nope, he wanted plants. This guy is wild. Then, with a seemingly innocent smile, Alice threatens to tell Madame Cien about it. Helen quakes in terror, imagining Cien surely chopping his head off if she finds out. Alice clarifies that she just wants to do business with him and has no intention of exposing him to Cien. Ooh, she better get both poison and antidote. That night, as she steps into the Duke's chamber, she is met by Adolf, the Duke's butler and Kais's last remaining ally. Although the medicine isn't helping, Madame Cien allows Adolf to administer it so she can maintain her image as a caring stepmother. To pull the butler away from Kais, Cien brings Alice into the picture and insists that she, as the Duchess, take responsibility for giving him the medicine. Alice shows Adolf the medication she received from Helen, which makes him suspicious, but he has no authority to interfere. After Adolf leaves, Alice sits beside Kais, but is startled when that annoying maid bursts into the room, claiming she's come to verify whether Alice will indeed administer the poison, as instructed by Madame Cien. She even demands Alice hurry up. Instead of getting angry, Alice smiles, convinced that this situation is actually working in her favor. Having Maris report back to Cien will make her less suspicious. She then gently helps the sleeping Kais drink the entire bottle of poison and immediately shows Maris the empty vial. Once Maris exits, Alice begins speaking to Kais, assuring him that the drink she gave him was not poison. As expected, she had asked Helen to create an antidote. However, it appears that developing a cure for Kais's condition is impossible. Alice, of course, suspected he was lying, so Helen went on to explain that no antidote or divine power works on the poison given to the Duke. Even if they stop administering it, he's certain the Duke will die within a year. Still, that doesn't mean Alice will continue to feed the Duke poison. To deceive Cien, she ordered Helen to create something that resembled the poison, and he succeeded in producing a bottle of supplements. Alice sighs, because she sincerely wants to save Kais, but it seems there's no way to cure him. Staring at his beautiful face and thinking about him dying so young feels like such a waste. Well, they're just supporting characters anyway. As she notices his arm slide to the side, she decides to tuck it in, only to discover that his arm has a festering wound. She already feels awful for him, and the fact that no one noticed Kiss's severe wounds worries her even more, despite her failure to save Sis's life. She is determined to help him recover from his injury. As she reaches out to examine the wound, a sudden burst of light from her palm catches her completely off guard. Afterward, she notices that Kiss's arm is halfway healed. Seeing the light and the healing convinces her that she possesses divine power. I like how she's not totally clueless. Our girl isn't ignorant about such things because she's read so many novels and understands magic and heavenly power. What confuses her, however, is that the original Alice never had this kind of power. Armed with this newfound knowledge, she gives it another go, this time placing her hand on the scar to summon the light once more and make Kiss's arm scar-free. She doesn't fully understand what's happening to her, but she thinks the gods must have felt guilty about bringing her into this world and compensated by giving her these abilities. Regardless, she chooses to pat him gently as a way to end the day before she leaves the room. After that, Kiss moves his hand and opens his eyes, and oh my goodness, he's so lovely. Now that he's awake, we realize it was Alice who woke him up. All this time, Kiss was trapped in a dark place, trying to break free from the shadows surrounding him. He was on the verge of giving up when, out of nowhere, he saw a glimmer of light. With what little energy he had left, he rushed toward it, jolting awake as if from a nightmare. He sits up, rubbing his head in confusion. Kiss's mother died not long after giving birth to him, and his father's mistress, Cullen, who became pregnant shortly after his mother's death, also lost her baby after giving birth. This is tragic, but Kiss's father is a jerk for getting someone pregnant so soon after his wife passed away. Cullen was a nameless noblewoman, and after losing her baby, everyone expected her to be cast out. But she got lucky when the Duke fell from a horse while playing with a bard and became disabled. Karma got him good. After that, the Duke's reputation was ruined by scandal, forcing the de Roth's vassals to hand the duchy over to Cullen, since Kiss was only 2 years old at the time. Look at adorable baby Kiss sucking his thumb. After a few years, Kiss began to mature into a fine young man, which worried Cullen. She feared he might take her place, so she attempted to kill him in various ways, including poisoning his food and hiring an assassin. When those methods failed, she sent the mere 12-year-old boy to the battlefield, assuming he would die. But her plans backfired. Kiss returned even stronger and became a war hero. Thanks to his service, Kiss became Duke at the age of 16. But when he returned home, he was horrified to find that his stepmother had secured herself a new son while he was gone. Am I to assume this child is his half-brother, or did Cullen have an affair? Either way, Kiss couldn't just throw her out, so he moved Cullen into the annex and focused on restoring the de Roth duchy's honor. He spent a decade rebuilding the family's image and had completely forgotten about the wicked woman living in the annex. He has no recollection of anything after drinking water and concludes that Cullen must have drugged him. As a result, he plans to investigate fully. Kiss stretches his stiff body and begins to change his clothes, only to discover that the war injury caused by dark magic has healed. Everyone had told him it would never heal, even with divine power or magic potions, and he expected it to have festered by now. However, there's not even a scar, which baffles him. He decides not to dwell on it for the moment. There are more pressing matters to deal with. He leaps from his balcony and visits the shaken Adolf with a proud smile. Adolf, crying with relief, reports everything that has happened. Cullen has moved into the main mansion. She dismissed Kiss's aide and the captain of his guards. Worse, she disbanded the Dearth Knights, also known as the Knights of the Black Lion, who led their forces to triumph in the war. Kiss also discovers that he's been in a coma for 6 months. All the servants have been replaced, and there's a new doctor named Helen. But what surprises him the most? He's married.
Oh.
I just know their first meeting is going to be a disaster. 2 days later, at their meeting with Cullen, she compliments Alice on completing her duty correctly, which Alice shamelessly smiles about, while Dr. Helen sweats nervously on the side. He then casts a glance at our girl, who instantly changes her innocent-looking smile into a deadly gaze to ensure Helen doesn't try anything funny, causing the poor doctor to tremble. Alice has been quiet ever since. In addition to threatening him with exposing his stash of hidden rare herbs, she's also aware that Helen has been selling on the black market. She couldn't forget reading about this in the novel because the name of Helen's shop is weird, so if he attempts to deny his crimes, she can simply investigate the shop, which was established with Der Roth money. Oh, she's really playing her cards right. After that, Alice hears that Lady Melton will be visiting their mansion to learn about the capital before making her debut in high society. This alarms Alice because Lady Melton is supposed to arrive in the story after the Duke's death, implying that the original plot is changing. As I already mentioned, Alice and Kiss are merely supporting characters. So, allow me to give you a little overview of the story our girl transmigrated into. She finds herself inside the novel I Shall Offer the Crown to You, where Lady Sienna Melton, Kiss's younger cousin, is the female lead. The book begins with Kiss's death, prompting Sienna to head to the capital. The Duke is buried immediately, and Alice is already on trial for poisoning him. Yet, Melton suspects that someone else orchestrated the Duke's death and starts investigating Madame Cullen. However, before she can find any evidence, the villains make sure the entire De Roth duchy is erased from the empire, even setting the mansion on fire. Melton is unfazed and sets out to find the Duke's scattered vassals to restore her family's honor. During her mission, she ends up treating the seriously injured third prince she finds in the street, and blah blah blah, they fall in love and live happily ever after. However, in this novel, only the main characters get happy endings. All the minor characters who help them end up dead. This fact frustrates Alice. Later, Maris informs Alice that she must go to the Duke's room, as ordered by Cullen. What she doesn't know is that her husband is already awake and exercising in the room. During Kiss's earlier meeting with Adolf, they agreed to keep his consciousness hidden because he needs to gather his allies before confronting his stepmother. He also learns that his wifey is the eldest daughter of C. Spori, who is sold off for the sake of her family. But Kiss isn't concerned. He believes this Alice girl is trying to kill him. He pretends to be asleep as soon as Alice enters the room and is understandably stunned when she starts chatting with him and gushing over his body. She will surely regret her babbling mouth in the future. While he secretly listens to his so-called wife, he finds it strange that she keeps talking to him even though she believes he's unconscious. Maris then enters the room with a basin and towel, informing Alice that it's for washing the Duke. Alice's face flushes as she realizes what her mother-in-law meant. The idea of scrubbing an adult man's bare body makes her completely short-circuit, prompting Maris to smirk, thinking Alice is surprised she has to do something that servants usually handle. Sorry, Maris, but this girl is totally fine with that. She's just overheating at the thought of washing the Duke's sculpted body. She sneaks a quick glance at Kiss and his buttonless shirt nearly drives her mad, prompting our not-so-innocent girl to turn to prayer for guidance, to save herself from sinful thoughts. Maris interrupts, reminding her that it's late and time to get started, despite Alice's secret desire to flee. While Alice is still debating what to do, Maris starts to touch the Duke, which worries her. Alice immediately grabs Maris's hand and asks what she's doing. Although Maris explains she's removing the Duke's clothes so Alice can wash him, Alice still questions whether she can trust someone working for Madame Cullen with such a task. She begins to suspect that Madame Cullen may be plotting something through Maris. So, Alice decides to do it herself and orders Maris to leave. Maris is surprised by this unexpected decision. As Alice gazes at the Duke, she feels a deep and persistent sense of discomfort, fully aware that she alone bears responsibility for his well-being, even if she lies to herself about washing him. Driven by her concern for the possible harm that might result from inadequate care, she commits herself to the task. To stay composed, she treats his body like a sculpture. Her only job is to clean it carefully. Softly, she begins to wash him, but a faint blush graces her cheeks as she steals a glance. As she continues her work, she engages in inner dialogue to stay focused. But the funniest part of all this? My guy is awake and staying perfectly still. He needs an Oscar for this performance. After completely washing his upper body, Alice feels a strange sense of pride as she admires his captivating form. Feeling satisfied with her progress, she reaches for his pants, but suddenly pauses, realizing this part doesn't feel quite right. She freaks out, unsure what to do or where to begin. Eventually, she starts crying, blaming Madame Cullen for putting her in this position. Still, she is determined to care for him no matter what, so she resolves to follow through to the very end. Just as she's on the verge of unfastening his pants, Adolf enters the room, effectively halting her actions. She freezes, eyes locked with his, realizing she's in big trouble. She immediately lets go of the Duke's pants, her face a mask of shame. The second-hand embarrassment I feel for this girl is on another level. Adolf was actually walking through the corridors when he overheard the servants talking about how the Duchess was currently tending to the Duke, and how she was washing his body at that very moment. This news startled Adolf, prompting him to rush to the Duke's room. Meanwhile, Alice quickly gathers herself to avoid appearing suspicious, just in time for Mr. Butler. Alice confronts the butler about his lack of etiquette, urging him to knock before entering, which prompts him to apologize. However, Maris interrupts their conversation, claiming that the butler's actions were inappropriate for someone in his position. Alice knows that Cullen is already keeping a close eye on the butler, so she can't give Maris an opportunity to find fault with him. Resolving to help Adolf, Alice tells Maris that there must be a solid reason for the butler's urgency. This forces Adolf to explain that hearing the Duchess was washing the Duke by herself made him feel terrible. Alice accepts his reasoning, but that parasite Maris insists on informing Madame Cullen about Adolf anyway, and she promptly leaves the room. Afterward, Alice wonders why Adolf still hasn't left, preventing her from finishing cleaning the Duke. She's really invested in completing her task. Unexpectedly, Adolf proposes that he will continue washing the Duke, which surprises Alice, especially since Madame Cullen specifically assigned her the task. In response, Adolf clarifies that he doesn't intend to take over the full responsibility of caring for the Duke. Instead, he suggests helping her, as the task is physically demanding and has clearly caused her to perspire. Alice finds joy in not having to wash the Duke's lower body every day and happily leaves the rest to him. Look at that little angel on her shoulder, celebrating. Not today, Satan. Not today. After everyone else leaves, Adolf discreetly informs the Duke, who is now completely drained from pretending to be unconscious for so long. If he's exhausted, then why does he still look so handsome? Adolf promptly expresses his regret for arriving late, while Kiss reflects on Alice's behavior. She treats someone's body as if it's sacred, not dirty. Having endured Madame Cullen's mistreatment and being forced into marriage, Kiss initially saw Alice as someone timid and frightened. However, after listening to her speak, he realizes he'll need to be cautious because she's very different from what he expected. Adolf then informs the Duke that he has already sent a letter to Baron Melton, requesting that he send his daughter as soon as possible. He also reports that Madame Cullen has received word that Lady Melton is visiting the capital. The Duke intends to begin acting in earnest once Lady Melton arrives, and he instructs Adolf to remain quiet until then. Adolf further informs him that, when the Duke collapsed, Madame Cullen had been giving him some medicine. That medicine is now in Alice's care, and Adolf is concerned because he cannot verify its contents. From this, Adolf suspects that Dr. Helen's renowned poison-making skills may have contributed to the Duke's collapse. The Duke immediately orders him to bring Helen to him. Meanwhile, the Melton family's carriage has arrived. Sienna Melton is incredibly captivating, with her vibrant crimson hair that radiates warmth and her mesmerizing emerald eyes that reflect nature's beauty. Madame Cullen smiles as she greets Lady Melton, but the bold young woman ignores her and greets Alice instead, introducing herself to the new Duchess. Let's hope she treats our girl nicely. Lady Melton's actions create a tense, chilling atmosphere, causing Alice to panic as she anticipates Madame Cullen's reaction. In an effort to protect herself, Alice steps in and corrects Lady Melton, explaining that she should have greeted the Duchy's esteemed elders first. Lady Melton flinches at the scolding, but truthfully, she's crying inside, as she had no bad intentions. Lady Melton then apologizes to Madame Cullen, admitting she made a mistake by assuming the Duchess would be the acting head of the household in the Duke's absence. Madame Cullen graciously accepts the apology, reassuring her that the misunderstanding doesn't bother her, and invites her inside to rest. That same day, Alice tells the Duke that she's encountered him twice, and will keep seeing him twice a day from now on. She continues to converse with the Duke, which makes Helen wonder why she bothers speaking when the Duke is supposedly in a deep sleep and unable to hear. Alice sees nothing wrong with speaking to him, and she even gushes about how radiant he looks after all her cleaning efforts. Helen informs her that the Duke's condition will continuously worsen. Though he is still alive, the sleeping poison is slowly destroying his body and will prevent any improvement in his condition or complexion. As Alice gazes once more at the Duke's face, she notices a healthy glow to his skin, leading her to suspect it might be a result of the divine power she accidentally unleashed upon him. Curious, she asks Helen about the possibility of using heavenly power to relieve pain and cure disease. However, she learns that the Duke will never awaken, rendering any treatment method ineffective. However, Helen is intrigued by how Alice managed to heal the injury on the Duke's arm, which he had witnessed firsthand. Still, she decides not to tell Helen about her divine powers and proceeds with the task of giving the Duke his medicine. She pours the medicine into the Duke's mouth, remembering to have Helen drink the remaining potion to confirm that he is, in fact, giving her a nutritional supplement and not poison. After warning him about the consequences of betrayal, she forces him to drink it all in front of her. She's relieved to confirm it's just vitamins since he drinks it all at once. Respect to her, she didn't trust the doctor, and rightly so. That afternoon, while Helen strolls down the corridor still preoccupied with Alice's unusual behavior, he's shocked when Adolf suddenly appears in front of him, smiling innocently. The two head to the Duke's room, and Helen begins to feel uneasy when Adolf announces their presence to the sleeping Duke. Then, to Helen's horror, the Duke rises from his bed, looking very much alive. The Duke draws his blade and presses it to Helen's neck, demanding an explanation about the poison. Helen insists that he was merely following Madame Cullen's orders. He says he had no idea who would be taking the poison and emphasizes that he had no intention of killing the Duke. He pleads for his life, promises loyalty, and insists that his knowledge of medicinal herbs could make him useful. As Helen desperately tries to save himself, Adolf intervenes, informing the Duke that since Helen produced the poison, he must know how to treat it. Adolf urges the Duke to keep him alive for now, and Helen quickly bows in gratitude. The Duke then learns that both Alice and Helen have been administering his medicine for 4 days, which is strange, because he has also been awake for 4 days. He's surprised to find out that he's been drinking nutritional supplements instead of poison, thanks to Alice's orders for Helen to switch them out. This leads the Duke to question Alice's true intentions, survival, and maybe to admire your sculpted body, Mr. Sleeping Beauty.